The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. The apostles gathered together with Jesus and reported all they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." People were coming and going in great numbers, and they had no opportunity even to eat. So they went off in the boat by themselves to a deserted place. People saw them leaving, and many came to know about it. They hastened there on foot from all the towns and arrived at the place before them. When he disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. The Gospel of the Lord. All right, so quick poll. How many people here live and have a perfect life, a life with no trouble, no suffering, no problems, no issues whatsoever? Anybody? Nope, no takers on that? Okay, how many people here? Okay, we got one taker. We can talk later. But how many people here live a normal life, a typical life that has suffering, that's difficulties, that, have issues, worries? How many people live that kind of a life? Yeah, pretty much everybody here. And again, if there's anybody who doesn't raise their hand for that, then I'd like to talk to you later because I want to know your secret. But we know life is not easy. Life is hard. A lot of difficulties, a lot of things we have to worry about. And, even Jesus, who lived life perfectly, even him did not have a perfect life. We know that he suffered in life, that he struggled in life, that he had a lot of difficulties in life. So we can expect that we are going to share in that, to share in that life like with Jesus in our own life. And last few Sundays, probably the last 3 Sundays, I believe, our Gospels had focused on faith in Jesus, about having faith in Jesus, and with that faith, when we have that faith, what kind of miracles Jesus can perform in our lives when we have that faith. And that was the big focus. Today, in our gospel, Jesus is now telling us, okay, now let's take the next step from there. So fine, have faith in me. But now I want you to take that faith, and I want you to allow me, the Good Shepherd, to lead you. I want to lead you as the Good Shepherd. Now, he tells us in Psalm 23, the psalmist tells us, speaking for God, he says that the benefits from when we allow Jesus to be our Good Shepherd and allow ourselves to follow him, allow him to lead, he tells us, what do we get that we see in Psalm 23? Very famous one, the benefits we get when we follow him, when we allow him to lead us. Well, he gives us rest. He gives us courage. He refreshes our soul. And we dwell in the house of the Lord where we find kindness and goodness. He blesses us with everything we need. Now that's a deal. That is quite the deal. Yet, often we are still afraid to allow the Good Shepherd to lead us. We are afraid to follow him because we know, a lot of us with experience know that very often he leads us down these paths that are uncharted for us. Paths we've never been down before and know nothing about. He leads us towards destinations very often. Destinations we know very little about. And it's hard for us to trust. It's hard for us to have faith. But yet he tells us to have that faith in him. He tells us to follow him. He doesn't say that if we do follow him, that all of a sudden we won't have those difficulties in life. To the contrary, sometimes it can get even more difficult. But he will help us through that. He will help us through that. And he also reminds us and tells us that it is only through following him, it is in that following him, allowing him to lead us, that it is only that way that we will find true freedom, true happiness in our lives, in this life. If only we have that faith and only we allow Him to be that shepherd that leads us. And we see what happens in our first reading. We kind of start to get a hint of what happens when we don't allow Him to lead us, when we decide to chart our own path. So our first reading, Jeremiah. So the prophet Jeremiah, this takes place not too long before they were exiled, before the Babylonians came in, defeated them, and exiled them to Babylon. And we can see that God, through the prophet Jeremiah, is telling the kings, the leaders, or as he's calling them, the shepherds of his people, telling them that you're doing a bad job, guys. You are misleading my people. You are misleading your flock. And you are scattering them. And because they are doing that, the kings are doing that, they were appointed by God, because they're not leading properly, they're not being good shepherds, the people have turned their backs on God. They are no longer following God's commandments. And as a result of that, God no longer is protecting them. And so the Babylonians come in, defeat them, and they are exiled to Babylon. So they have lost their land, they've lost their home, they've lost their temple. They've lost what they feel, they've lost everything. And even up to a point where they feel like they've lost God. Even though God hasn't abandoned them, they feel like God has abandoned them now. And it wasn't until we see in later times that it wasn't until they turned back to God that then He was able to bring them back to their homeland and start blessing them again. So that's the consequences if we decide not to follow Him. And God does give us shepherds here on earth. He gives us people, He appoints people, calls people to be our shepherds here on earth. And what are these shepherds for? What is their job? God calls them to lead us, to guide us, to point us to Him, to point us to Christ. Christ is the one that saves. But these shepherds here on earth are called by God, just like our Blessed Mother, to point us to Christ. And then it is Christ who then leads us on that path to holiness. So who are the shepherds here on earth that we rely on? If I asked you who those shepherds were, I think a lot of people automatically will think the Pope, bishops, our priests, maybe deacons, I don't know. Depends on how much you trust me. Follow me, yeah. But who else is called to be shepherds here on earth? Everybody raise your hand. Exactly. All of us. Every one of us is called to be a shepherd. Parents shepherd their children. Spouses shepherd each other. Teachers shepherd. Even in our jobs, we should be ready to shepherd people. No matter what you do, doesn't matter your profession, doesn't matter your state in life, married, single, divorced, doesn't matter. You are called to be a shepherd. That is, to help lead and point people to Christ, who will then lead them down their path to holiness and to salvation. All of us are called. And so, what about age? You know, some people might think, I'm too young, or I'm too old. I don't know how to speak. Doesn't matter. You know what? You can still be a shepherd, and you're still called to be a shepherd. And prime example I always like to look at is, I can't tell you how many times I've had parents express to me over time that how the first time they hold their newborn baby, that very first time they hold that child, that up until that moment, they never knew that it was possible to love another person so deeply, so intensely, beyond description, that they didn't even know a love that intense existed. And you know what? That child is now shepherding those parents. Because that child, that little newborn baby, is teaching those parents a love that they never even knew existed. And in that, those parents now, in a small way, are able to experience what it means for God's love for them. A small taste of God's love for them. So even that little baby is able to shepherd. So none of us have excuses. So now today, Jesus had pity on the people because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he wanted to guide them. He wanted to guide them. So, moved by that pity, he began to teach them. And he started feeding them with his word. So, my brothers and sisters, let us pray that we are able to allow Christ to lead us as the Good Shepherd, to lead us as a Good Shepherd, to guide us, to feed us with his word. But let us also ask him to help us to be able to imitate the Good Shepherd, Jesus Christ, so that we may lead others also to him, so they too can experience those verdant pastures and the restful waters.